So I felt like talking about Death Stranding. Now, if some of you may have seen my one of my previous videos, when I was talking about Metal Gear Solid 1, I described how I was basically building like a hype train for myself to play Death Stranding 2. And after finishing Metal Gear Solid 1, 2, and 3, I finally got to play Death Stranding over the past maybe month or so, maybe a little bit less. I put about 75 hours into the game, give or take, and I really enjoyed it. It's an interesting game to talk about these days because when Death Stranding came out, it was a very contested title in terms of people. It wasn't really what people expected. It was quite different. People called it a walking simulator, said the gameplay loop was boring, this, that, and the other. So I was a bit apprehensive going into the game directly before Death Stranding 2, and that's the reason I wanted to play all the Metal Gear Solid games to get a feel for what a Kojima game really is, so I could really appreciate the things that Death Stranding did. Because from everything I'd heard, I knew that this was a game that would probably be best enjoyed by Kojima fans and maybe not by other people as much. So yeah, going into it, it definitely has a lot of Kojima weirdness, and at this point where he has his own studio, it definitely feels like he's completely let loose with pretty much no one to maintain checks and balances on him. So he's just doing his thing completely and building this world of his, which I think is probably the best thing about Death Stranding is the world. I think it's a really well built, both in terms of the mechanics and kind of the things that happen inside the game as well as the lore. I feel like it's just extremely interesting to explore, and all the different tools through which you traverse this world add to its character a lot. And I feel like terrain in video games is something that is hard to do, and I don't remember, but a while back I was listening to some content creator on YouTube who was talking about how even when the terrain is built to be kind of reflective of real life and kind of, because in real life terrain is not like in patterns, it's more random, it's more because it's a result of geographical phenomena and it's not like a perfect thing. And in video games, oftentimes whenever there's big worlds, there is a case of copy paste that happens that gives certain locations a samey feel. But I feel like in Death Stranding it's able to maintain that good balance of things feel familiar, in the sense if you keep traversing the same routes over and over to bring orders back and forth, you eventually get an idea of what paths you usually take, and the game has some indicators for that as well. But even naturally you start landmarking these bits of terrain that seem pretty normal at first sight when you're first on a mission out on a delivery. So I think the game really balances that well. While I would have liked more diversity in the terrain, maybe it does get a little bit, I think, other than some parts in the middle central section of the map where you do get in the snow and you do have those rocky kind of, I don't even know how to describe them, those like cube cut areas where the mule camps are and you go towards the filmmaker, etc. Those were interesting, but I feel like majority of the land is just Iceland, and I do appreciate that. But once you put 75 hours into a game, it does start to feel slightly repetitive when you're trying to max out relationships with all the different preppers and cities. So and I will be going into spoilers of the story towards the later part, but just to add more, I thought the story was quite interesting. I will say the most interesting parts of the story itself are the world that's being built around. I had a lot of fun reading emails, reading lore entries, interviews through the terminal interface as well as your cufflinks. I thought, I'm not usually someone who spends a lot of time in menus reading up on lore, because I feel like if a game's lore is good, it will be delivered through the gameplay and the story itself, and that's what makes good lore. But I feel like in this I was intrigued enough at all points, especially in the middle when there's not a lot of story flowing through with the cutscenes, and I was playing the game in a way where I was definitely going back and forth between prepper locations a lot, because at first my goal was to kind of 100% this game because I was enjoying the gameplay loop of it, which towards the end I thought I had enough. I had reached 5-star relationships with about 30 of the preppers out of 36 I think there are, I'd built a bunch of the roads, and at that point, I think I'd done almost all the major side quests as well. Uh, so yeah, I thought that I had my fill of the game at that point, so I didn't end up going and collecting all the like data chips and all those things. But um, yeah, I think especially in those middle parts where the story is not that existent, I was definitely falling back a lot on all the interview logs and all those things that come in that really add to the world and the mystery and intrigue of what really is happening, because the world is also presented in a way where the characters also do not know a lot about what's happening and you're learning along with these people. So it's interesting to have those puzzle pieces start falling in place over time, and I think it's really it gets you invested into the world. And the story at the beginning is quite simple. You're just heading east to rescue your sister Amelie, and by extension of that, you're also connecting and completing the chiral network. So I thought that was an interesting enough premise, but it was really the world and all the different things like BTs, BBs, what Bridges really was, and the perspective of all these different characters, and the journals you get of the mysterious man at the start, which turns out to be probably the best side quest in the entire game by the end. I thought those were a lot of great parts about the game that I really, really enjoyed. And one thing I will say about this game is that in real life, I'm a person who really enjoys like checklisting stuff, in the sense that I do have that kind of mentality where completing tasks and checking them off gives me that kind of endorphin rush or that satisfaction, and if there's some work left lingering, it's always nagging at me, and I don't really like that feeling. So I feel like this was the first time in a video game that that feeling really transitioned and translated to a comprehensive and compelling gameplay loop for me, where making these every time a new set of preppers were opened up through the story by connecting them to the UCA. I would go out, I would bring them lost cargo, I would take orders from different terminals to different locations to max out that relation, get that 5 star, and have that star pinned onto my delivery suit. I thought that was really satisfying for me, and I really had a lot of fun doing it as well. One thing I did wish this game had was a music player, because I think the music of this game is so extraordinary. All the songs by Loror and a couple of other artists like Silent Poets, I thought all the songs were phenomenal, but the only place you can really listen to them is your like your private room. Once you enter that, you can play the songs, but I don't really hang around the private rooms much. It's more of like just refresh my stamina and get back going. So I do wish there was a music player that you could play the songs that you have unlocked along the way on those kind of journeys, because I feel like it would add even more of that kind of loneliness feeling, but also this kind of intrinsic thought process that this game intrigues and evolves out of you and elicits out of you, is the word I was looking for. So yeah, those are a few things that I wish were in the game that would have made the gameplay loop even more compelling for me, because every time you do come upon a new major location and that song starts playing and you're kind of walking towards it and the sun starts shining out of the clouds because you've just passed a pretty big region of timefall with BTs, it feels like you're actually connecting this world, and it gives you that feeling of being that link that's bringing together this world, and I really love that, and I wish you could simulate that at other points as well, even when you're bringing in just lost cargo or standard order deliveries. So those are a few things about the gameplay loop and what I think about the game as a whole. I thought it was a pretty fantastic game. I loved all the weirdness of it, I loved the world building of it, and I am quite excited to go into the sequel, because I thought the characters themselves were phenomenal. Clifford Unger, Mads Mikkelsen as Clifford Unger was really, really good, even though he doesn't have a lot of screen time and like he only comes in select sections. I feel like he does a really good job of making that character compelling, and you're constantly thinking throughout the story of who this guy really is and what his connection to the main story is. And I think the character of Higgs is phenomenal as well. I think Troy Baker does a really good job of bringing on that kind of creepy, terroristy kind of behavior and all of those mannerisms that he has. I think he makes for a very compelling like mechanical antagonist for most of the duration of the game. So I think the performances are incredible. I do wish Sam spoke more. I feel like he's very absent in a lot of the things that happen, and a lot of his reactions at times don't feel very authentic. They feel a little bit like, I don't know, like they're only there to kind of give a reaction but not really meaning anything, or not really telling me what the character is feeling in that moment. So I thought some of those things could have been better, but overall, I think it's a really unique and different game. Definitely something like most people probably wouldn't have played before, and that was some of the reasons why it was very divisive when it first came out. But I think it manages to nail what it's trying to do very well, apart from like a little nitpicks that I wish were better. Uh, but yeah, those are my overall thoughts about this game. I think it's pretty fantastic, and I really really enjoyed it. Going into spoilers now, talking about the story, I thought the story was definitely interesting. The basic premise of it is quite simple, and it really starts going batshit crazy towards the end of the game. And I made the mistake of I was playing this game pretty late at night towards the end, and I had made it back all the way east when that last major boss fight happens, in the sense that with the BT, the dolphin BT that comes out. So I did that, and then I went into the last portion of the game expecting to maybe finish it next morning. But once that last period starts, it kind of doesn't stop. After the Higgs boss fights, it just keeps going, and there's cutscenes upon cutscenes, and it's like extremely uh, yeah, it takes a while. So yeah, I was not regretful, but it was quite interesting to have gone into that at that time, because it was like 5 a.m. by the time I'd finished, and it was like a crazy experience to then have to go to sleep on, because there's just so much that happens towards the end of that game. So going towards the story, I thought everything about like Amelie being the extinction entity, and kind of all of that backstory that comes in, of how you're kind of only delaying the inevitable, and but that's also worth coming together for. I think it was a trope that was very relevant in the game and what it was trying to be from the very beginning. And kind of the other people I've heard talk about this game, one of the major people I listen to in the video gaming world is Skill Up, and I think he talks about some of the things that Kojima talks about with this game, being like the ideology of the stick in the rope, which is a common thing in Japan. I think it's a quote that comes on at the starting of the game as well. I think it really drives home that point of the importance of the rope towards the end, and really ties it together, no pun intended. I think even though some things are a little bit on the edge, over the top, and they don't always land, but I'm always kind of floored by the craziness and wildness that Hideo Kojima is able to go into with these games, despite them being so big budget. And this was something I said in my video with my thoughts about 28 years later as well, where I've reached a point where I've started to appreciate anything that's unique and wildly different from the things we've usually started to see. And me being someone at a younger age where like I don't always have a lot of time to be playing games because of studies and all these other things, so being someone who has played a lot of the mainstream games only for a long period of time, and only getting into more of the uniques and the indies more lately, I feel like this game is the perfect mesh between having that high production, having these Hollywood artists involved, and still being able to do these wild and crazy things that most studios probably would not even swing for. And I think Hideo Kojima is probably one of the only people who would be able to pull this off in a successful manner and have that pull towards this game, even if it's weird and not everyone likes it. And I think I really appreciate that he takes advantage of that and makes something that, while may not always hit, it does at least elicit thoughts, elicits a response, and has you thinking about the game and the things it did. So I really appreciate it for that specifically. I think the cast of characters is also very interesting. I think specifically towards the villain side, like if you look at the two major antagonists, I would say being Higgs for most of the game, and Clifford Unger as through those BB flashbacks, and also in those war sections. I think they're a really big highlight. Like they're always aura farming, and it's super super cool. But just looking at them, I think is the most accurate reflection of the world of this game, where it gives you all the weirdness, all the quirkiness, all the coolness, all in like single frames, and it's just an experience to watch it. And I love that experience as being someone who also enjoys movies a lot. I feel like the blending of those genres is really compelling, and I really enjoyed all of those scenes, all of those cut scenes that involved those characters. uh, I think the ending going on for so long after the first set of credits have rolled and then they roll again, I think all of that uh, exposition of the story was quite interesting, even with Amelie. While I felt like some of the emotional moments weren't necessarily earned fully, because I feel like I haven't completely connected with Sam as a character apart from his relationship with Lou. I feel like with all the other characters, it seems kind of cursory to me because he is so absent emotionally throughout a lot of the story. While we do see an arc where he lets people touch him by the end and he's not alone anymore and he's more involved with the community, and he's found some of these people who really he thinks care for them and he cares for them as well. I think all of that is really interesting on the surface level, and it's really nice to watch and think about. But like, the more I think about if those emotional moments really made me feel anything, then I feel like I don't think they made me feel that much, as on top of just the spectacle of all the things that are happening on the beach, and then the different directions that this story keeps pulling you even at the end, where there's twist upon twist upon twist in classic Kojima style. So that was one thing that I do wish was there in a more prominent way, where like the Metal Gear Solid games are by no means primarily about the emotional connection that Snake makes, right? They're more about the cool factor, the kind of politics that's happening, what it means to be a soldier, but it brings in those emotional questions, especially with the story of Big Boss and even Solid Snake in MGS1 and Raiden in MGS2. It brings in those emotional things as like a very core part of these characters, and it kind of weaves it together with the story they're trying to tell. And I feel like that delivery towards the end, there would be at least one scene that would feel like some sort of gut punch, where you would feel bad for the character, you would really empathize with what's happened to them. And like, the thing that comes most prominently to mind is Big Boss and Boss's storyline, right? When that monologue is happening over Big Boss getting his title, and you really feel those moments. And I felt like, well, I didn't feel those moments when it came to Death Stranding. But the story of it all, the narrative of it all, bringing the world in together, I thought was really, really fantastic. Another video I watched recently that I would like to reference back to was one by Mr. Maddie Plays, and he kind of brought up the fact that how when you're going back east, you kind of have these expositions by Deadman, who's slowly unwrapping the story of Clifford Unger to you, and you're getting those pieces of information as you're making your way back. And then you kind of see all of those things again in the cutscene that happens towards the end, where you finally find out that Sam is Cliff's son, and basically everything that happened with Bridget and Die Hard Man, and why they ended up in that situation, and what those flashbacks were also about. So that was an interesting point to me, where once I think back to it in hindsight, I feel like there was a decent amount of repetition of story beats and kind of exposition moments, because especially for me, as someone who was also reading a lot of the interviews, a lot of the logs, I knew a lot of the things that were being told to me in cutscenes later. But I can understand that, because the people who are only playing the main game, you can't rely on just kind of the interviews and all the reading material to get you to that point. But that is more where I kind of felt some amount of repetition, where things that maybe felt like a revelation happened to me before through reading. So that was one thing. But in the case of Deadman's kind of voice notes or codec that you get in the middle, I didn't find those as repetitive, because I was doing a lot of side missions while I was making my way back to the east, and I spent a decent amount of time in that, and it was nice to get those little tidbits of story along the way, and I thought it was conveyed in a pretty natural manner. One thing I do wish was present was that the codec calls, though they don't happen that often in this game, it would have been nice to have moving faces on those, like we used to have, like Metal Gear style back in the day. That would have been like a nice callback, and also a fun way to still have those characters be able to express their emotions, especially given how good the tech is on facial animations and all the scans in this game, where things feel like it's the actor doing it. Uh, so I wish that was present, but it's a little nitpick again. It's not that big of a deal. So yeah, overall, I thought the ending was also deserved. BB's song, once you're going to maybe like, you think you're going to incinerate him, while I knew that uh, Death Stranding 2 does still have a baby. I wasn't sure if that was Lou, so I thought maybe he does burn it and then he wants to be a father again, and then something happens later on in life where he has another baby now. But he saves Lou, and then he has that final flashback of him being Cliff's son. I think that happens at that point. But yeah, all of the cutscenes, that basically a 2 hour movie that tied together the game at the end, I really did enjoy, and I thought it brought things together very well, and it felt like watching a movie, and I really liked all the performances. And I do have to say, Bridget was low-key kind of the villain of this game, and I really like that as well. It's kind of interesting that like she kills Cliff, she has no regret about that, but because the child died, she's like, oh, I will become a parent now. That was interesting, and I think the revelation of Amelie and Bridget being the same person was also interesting. I feel like it could have been teased a little bit lesser for it to be more of a revelation. Like, previously, people are bringing up the question of, has anyone really even seen Amelie? Has anyone interacted with her beyond a hologram? So those things kind of led me to believe that there may be a twist like this coming on. Sometimes I feel like just having that shock impact towards the end is a better way to go about it, but that's another stylistic choice which I can't criticize. I think it was just a different way to go about it. But overall, to give my thoughts on Death Stranding, I thought it was fantastic. It was definitely at least like, I want to say an 8.5, 9 out of 10. I would lean closer towards a 9 out of 10 game. I thought I had a lot of fun with it. I thought it was something really unique and something really different, and it introduced me to a new gameplay loop that I pretty much had not seen before: planning paths, tracking, building zip lines, building roads, which I fell in love with building roads for a little bit. Like, I was just bringing materials from here and there, going into BT territory, mule territory, find those ceramics, metals, and just build out those roads. And I thought all of that was really, really fun. It really captivated me, and even throughout, only towards the end, after I had finished the story at 75 hours, I was like, okay, I don't feel the need anymore to go out to these optional preppers, bring them into the UCA and do all of those 5-star connections. But before that, I was fully enjoying myself and on board the entire time. And I thought Death Stranding was a really, really great game, and I'm looking forward to starting on Death Stranding 2 extremely soon and give my thoughts on that as well. But that's all for now. Peace.